Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you for such a warm introduction. This question that was just posed, whether communication from the heart is realistic. Is it a realistic proposition in this world? I think we can easily reverse that also. I mean, is communication without the heart realistic? I think we can just as easily ask that question. Because from my experience as a musician, right, that's my background as a violinist. Now, not just as a musician, but also as an audience member, right? An audience member in concerts, musical concerts, or even at a film. Now, when you listen to a musician play, if it has no feeling, does it communicate anything at all? I don't think so. Right? It can be perfect. It can be note for note perfect. It can be in rhythm. It can be in tune. But if there's no heart in it, if there's no feeling, if there's no sincerity, then I don't think it says anything at all. In that case, it's kind of an imitation of music. Whereas, on the other hand, if there's a musician and every note they sing is filled with sentiment, you're going to forgive their wrong notes. The wrong notes, if there are any, they won't matter to you one bit, because your heart now will be resonating with that feeling. Something has been, in a very abstract way perhaps, transmitted to your heart, and your heart now resonates with the same feeling, and you enjoy it and appreciate it, and you say it's a good musician. You know? And the same thing is true when we speak to each other. When your spouse or boyfriend or girlfriend or whoever says, "I love you." Now imagine if they just say it in such a casual way, like people do on the phone, right? "Okay, I love you, bye," like that. It doesn't say anything. It's a habit. It becomes a habit. You say such things, right? But when you hear that in such a way, your heart doesn't leap out of your chest. Perhaps the first time that person ever told you those 3 words, your heart leapt out of your chest, right? Because people take a long time before they're ready to say such words. So when the first time they say it, they really mean it. But then when it becomes habitual, and that's another story altogether. So we know so much of the time where the words and the inner feeling do not match. So then, in spite of the words, and in spite of the brilliance of the mind behind the words, the intellect behind the words, we can say that those words do not really communicate. If the sentiment isn't real, we can all feel that. So I think that it's impossible to remove the heart from communication. I also feel a little bit silly being here in this nation speaking about the role of the heart, because I think you guys get it better than most other countries, to be honest. In places I've been. Okay, that doesn't mean there isn't room for improvement, of course. I'm not saying that. There's always room for improvement, And we can take our strengths and increase our strengths, right? And understand our strengths also. Part of this is about bringing awareness to this talent, perhaps. I think when we speak about communication, the one thing that we often forget about is the other side of communication. We think about talking. What about listening? That's equally, if not more important, right? So listening with the heart is even more important than speaking with the heart. Listening is a very deep subject, in fact. If you're really, really listening, you become completely void in that moment that you're listening. Because if you retain anything inside you at that moment when another person is speaking, then you're not really open to what they're saying. There's some preconception in my mind already. I know what you're about. I know what you're saying, even before I've heard you, complete your thought. And there's something within me, and I'm listening to that idea inside myself more than I'm listening to the other person in front of me. So listening requires total openness. And in fact, it very much resembles what is spoken about in so many, in so many spiritual traditions also, as a state of the witness. You see this idea of the state of the witness being brought out in so many spiritual traditions and spiritual texts. That inner witness. And that is what listening is. If somebody's speaking to me, right? If somebody's speaking to me and I'm already judging them, I'm already reacting to what they're saying. I may not even say anything, but that means I'm not listening. My heart isn't open. So to really understand another person, my heart has to be open. This witnessing idea is something that's very, very deep, because most of the time I'm involved with things in my life. I'm interacting with others. I'm interacting with my own thoughts. Now, there's a concept in physics, right, in quantum physics also, where you have physicists, they're trying to measure the location, or the nature, in fact, of a particle, right, these subatomic particles. And they have a lot of difficulty in doing so. The reason they have difficulty in measuring these or observing these particles is because they're so small, they're so subtle, that you can only locate them by shooting some laser beam at them or something, And if you shoot a laser beam, or you shoot a photon or an electron at another particle, you're going to knock it off its course, knock it off its trajectory. And so then you've changed the outcome of the experiment, right? You've interfered with it, interfered with the experiment. So now you can't observe its location. You can't observe the way it behaves naturally. So this, in fact, is what we tend to do, because when we use our mind so much, when we use our mind to we end up getting involved in the same way. When we're observing somebody, when we're looking for an outcome in a conversation, we get involved and we start reacting. And when we start reacting, we stop hearing. We stop really perceiving what they're trying to say. When people are speaking to us, we have to understand that there's some need that they're trying to express, right? Some inner need of some sort. Otherwise, there would be no reason to speak. Right? So whatever this inner need may be, we have to often see beyond the words. What is the true sentiment that's being expressed? We have to see beyond these words. And we have to understand that behind all of these inner needs, there's only a couple things at work. They say, it's been said that necessity is the mother of invention. Right? Necessity means some imbalance in myself, a need that needs to be fulfilled. Right? A need that needs to be fulfilled. And often in nature that means that there's something in excess within my system, or some deficiency within my system. Now when I have an excess within my system, that usually means that some energy has to come out, and that comes out in the form of anger. And when there's deficiency in my system, that means I require something else to be stable inside. And that is something we call desire. So in the yogic terminology, they call it kama and krodha, right? And that's something that's said to be with human beings since the very beginning of time, kama and krodha. A lot of people talk about getting rid of anger and getting rid of desire. Well, you have to reform it, but the essence of it you can't get rid of, because that's the balancing factor inside us. You have to fill the deficiency and you have to get rid of the excess, right? Now, in our conversations with people, when we're trying to express needs that need to be fulfilled, unmet needs, right? That's the essence of an interaction at any level. Now, this push and pull mechanism of anger and desire, that tends to be where we start having so many communications. Somebody's trying to express something, but I want to express something else. You see, I want my need to be met, they want their needs to be met, and we have this dissonance between us. Right? Nobody's able to listen. Everybody's intent on and balancing their own inner state by expressing these needs and hoping that the other person will meet them. So what that really means is that in order to be able to have a true flow between myself and somebody else, and for them not to be frustrated in the process, I'm going to have to empty myself out. I'm going to have to empty myself out and get rid of my expectation. Get rid of my expectation. And in some way find a contentment within myself so that I can remove my desire from the equation, so that I am there and available and open as a listener in that conversation, in that interaction with the other person. So the more I can balance myself out, the more the dynamic this interaction, this flow between us is going to be. There are so many ways in which we, especially let's say in PR, right? Now I'm not a PR professional, you guys know PR, but I can say that we're trying to win opinions, right? You're in public relations, or in any type of relation, whether it's public or private relations, we're trying to somehow sway opinions, right? Now, you can win an argument. You can be very brilliant, and you can put forth so many logical arguments that are convincing. But I think unless you win the heart, you haven't really won the argument, right? If you win the heart, it doesn't matter what your argument is. I think we see that oftentimes. People have irrational loyalty to people that they love, right? That person can do anything, but this loyalty is still there because they've won that person's heart. Oftentimes we end up losing a person's heart by winning the argument. See, we want to convince somebody that we're right. So we become brutish, we become arrogant, and maybe we're so smart, we are winning the argument. We convince the other person that we're right, but now how does that other person feel about us? That person feels humiliated by us. That person doesn't like us. So we've won the battle, we've lost the war. So I think this is where the manner of our speech becomes very important. Both the manner and the matter, both the content and our attitude become very, very important. Because if we beat somebody over the head, you can forget it. You are not swaying anything, if you beat somebody over the head. It means our attitude has to become very respectful towards the other person. We have to become very humble. We have to recognize that we may come and we may size another person up, and we may think ourselves to be so much greater than the other person. But of course there will always be so many ways in which that other person is greater than us. I think that's inevitable, and every person we meet, they'll have strengths that far outweigh our own strengths. And so our respect for that person has to be present, and they have to feel that. So this level of humility has to be there. This softness has to be there in our approach. Even if we're telling them a truth, that truth can't be a blunt truth, It can't be a truth that's going to hurt their heart. It has to be a truth that's going to somehow encourage them, encourage them or ennoble them if possible. So softness in our speech, you can't be harsh, you can't be arrogant. So many things like that have to be in place. We have to realize that we're dealing not just with a mind, but we're dealing with a heart. No matter what we think about communicating with the mind or communicating with the heart, in the end, the person who's at the other end of that, it's a heart that's being affected, And so that actually becomes a great responsibility for us in any interaction that we have, And it's within our power to help that person and to bring that person to a higher state of being even in that moment in which we're speaking with them. And ultimately, it isn't a choice between head and heart. When I was working in the Bollywood film music, right? I was saying earlier that if you play with feeling, it's no match for, let's say, a computerized music, right? Computerized music, they can never play with feeling. So when I was working with A.R. Rahman, because of a lack of musicians who knew how to play some of these instruments, he often had to have a computerized soundtrack, right? A program called MIDI in the computer. But whenever he had a chance, whenever there was a musician available, an actual musician, he would ask that person to come and play in the studio, and then he would substitute that with the computer track. So what you end up with, in the final version, is some mixture between real players and the computerized sounds, right? And of course, he doesn't have to pay for the computer tracks. He has to pay the musicians, and he's willing to pay the musicians because that completely changes the nature of the music, right? Now, if you go and you listen to a musician play, a really great musician now, right, it won't be the example I gave earlier. The example I gave earlier is I said you either have a musician with feeling or you have a musician who has perfect technique and perfect rhythm and perfect intonation. But none of those things are the ideal, are they? When you go hear a great musician or a great actor, you want to see that technical perfection along with something that moves your heart in some way or something that inspires you. Now when you put those two things together, then I think you have something very special. So for that, you need a marriage between the mind and the heart. You need a marriage between the intellect and the heart, where the heart itself has so much clarity. It has so much clarity that you do not have to in some way filter it by clever use of the intellect. Where itself, it is making so much sense when it's speaking to you, that the intellect just becomes a part of the heart in that sense. So we have to have this facility, mental facility, openness of heart, and those two things have to be so united that they're actually one quality. And self-control, which is actually poise. So I've spoken about quite a few things here today, I think. I haven't gone deeply into anything, but I think I've given quite a few topics. The main one being a balanced state where I'm not requiring so much from other people when I'm interacting with them. That push-pull mechanism, right? Fear and anger and desire, right? So having inner poise, having inner balance, not having preconceived notions about others, judgments of others. Most of the time, the co-author of this book, The Heartfulness Way, who's also my teacher, he gave one example when you're sitting on an airplane, right? You're sitting on the airplane and all the people are filing through. You're boarding the plane now. And you have nothing to do but see the faces of the people who are walking past you. And everybody who you see, you form an opinion of, based on not much, just how they look. You see you like this face, you don't like that face. Right, so all these thoughts that we're having, all these opinions that we're having, they tend to be positive or negative. And these positive or negative opinions are actually emotional reactions on a subtle level. Sometimes we have extreme emotional reactions, but sometimes, most of the time, they're subtler. So yes or no, like or dislike. These are always going through our minds. And like and dislike creates a ripple in us. It creates an emotion in us that doesn't go away. It stays with us. Right? You know that it stays with you because later on you meet somebody who reminds you in some way of somebody you don't like. You don't know this new person yet. They may be completely different than the person you don't like, but they have a physical resemblance, let's say. And now you don't like them. That shows that the emotion from the past has remained within that whole time. It's remained within us. Right? And has now become the filter through which we view the world in the present moment. So in that way we can see that our past experiences and our emotional reactions to those past experiences are now conditioning our present, preventing us from witnessing this reality of the present moment, preventing us from truly hearing the people who are in front of us, seeing the people who are in front of us. So what are we reacting to? What are we reacting to in these conversations? Are we reacting to them or are we reacting to ourselves? Right? And our previous conditioning. In yoga philosophy, they have a name for this. It's called samskara. Right? That means these emotional content that's built up as a result of my experiences. And they say that you will never be able to perceive reality to the extent that these are present within us, and they're present in all of us. So what do? We have to remove them. You see, so that's where I've come. I've been asked to come and do two things which seem very strange because they seem unconnected. I've been asked to speak about communication. I've been asked to give you guys meditation. So this is one of the links between them. Because through some of these techniques, you can remove this layer, these filters from the past, and all of a sudden live in an unconditioned state. We're no longer reacting so much in these conversations and interactions, where we can hear what a person is really trying to say to us and address their unmet needs in a way that their hearts will be won over by us, and our message will go straight to its target, because it's honest, and because it's sincere, because of the way we're speaking, because of the way we're listening, and because of the way we are. Because anything other than the way we are is going to be artificial. We can talk about modes of behavior, modes of listening, modes of speaking. It's all going to be artificial unless our nature comes up to that ideal that we're trying to replicate through our actions. So those are two things, levels we have to work on, these two levels simultaneously. We have to bring our characters up to this highest level and do something about our inner nature too, right? And as both of them rise together, then there's true transformation, and we can say that we become authentic. Not just our words, not just our actions, but we become totally integrated, because then I can mean what I say and say what I mean. So, let me just, let us go now into this meditation for just a few minutes, because I want to show you something that will help to create this sense of poise within you. Okay? And once you have that centeredness inside you, then everything changes. And so here, because this is all about the heart, we're actually going to meditate on the heart. Okay? And the way we has anybody here meditated before? You people, yes. Yes. So we'll meditate for about 10-12 minutes. We'll close our eyes when we do it. First I'll explain it to you. Here we're not only meditating on the heart, but we're trying to meditate on something so subtle, so that thing which gives the heart its special quality. That thing which makes it not just a lump of flesh. Right? I talk about uniting the mind and the heart. So this is how we unite the mind and the heart. Because by resting your mind on your heart, that's the first step. They can shake hands now, get to know each other. So when we close our eyes, we have this idea that within the heart, there is something special, some presence within the heart, like light. Sort of like a light within the heart, okay? Now this isn't something that you're going to see. You don't close your eyes and try to see some light. You don't close your eyes, try to imagine some light. But instead, you close your eyes and realize that this is something that you will only ever perceive through feeling. Because feeling is the language of the heart, after all. So all we do is we just put our attention there. And in a very patient way, we wait. We wait to see what kind of subtle feeling gradually emerges over the course of the duration of our meditation. And we may find our thoughts going here and there, and that's normal. We should not fight against the thoughts. They'll fight back even harder. But there's a fine line, because we also don't want to go too far in entertaining them either. We want to follow them down every rabbit hole. So if you get too distracted by the thoughts, you can just remind yourself, oh, I'm meditating on this light in the heart. Just like that. And bring your attention back to your heart. And even as thoughts go on in the background, just keep in this mode of feeling inside. And see what happens. Let it be an experiment. It's a very simple thing. So let me walk you through this.